Good morning, Senate Agriculture back in action. We're going to spend some time on our S 323, specifically Section 10. We've taken a lot of testimony on this section, and we're just trying to get it to figure out to whether we could end up having some language that we could get finished in enough time to meet crossover. We're still taking testimony. We had two folks on the agenda today. And I'm going to start off with Thomas Hand as first because he's the one that had asked if he could come in. And so Thomas is co-founder at MHG Solar. And Mr. Hand, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Oh, you're just pulling up.
All right. Can you hear me all right? I'm seeing a frozen screen.
Yeah, and if at the end of the day that it's going to keep on doing that, just shut your camera off and just that might help you with your bandwidth. But other than that, the floor is yours, sir.
All right. Thank you much. So thank you for the opportunity. Sorry, I'm getting a Zoom error. Just a moment.
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. My company is MHG Solar. We have developed approximately 60 megawatts of operational solar projects in Vermont over roughly the last 10 years. And that represents about 10% of all in-state solar. So 10% of all solar panels, all solar generating capacity in the state. And over that time, I've had the opportunity to work with a large number of landowners. We've built projects on slate quarries, gravel pits, farm fields, and in some cases, forested land. So I'd like to start today by telling you about three farm families that I've worked with recently. First is a farmer that's worked his land for more than 50 years. Sadly, he passed away a few weeks ago after a battle with cancer. But 50 years of hard work was able to allow him to put together more than 200 acres of land, which he has now left to his daughter and his grandkids. 4 years ago, my company reached an agreement with him to lease about 30 acres of his land, and that was hayfield and cornfield. Today, his family has a steady income stream of more than $30,000 a year. It's going to allow his widow, his daughter, and his grandkids to keep those 200 acres within the family if that's what they want to do. Second farm family, in the middle of the state, we've leased about 25 acres of gravel pit and hayfield. I just found out 2 days ago that the farmer's wife had a stroke. So they're in a difficult spot, but an old gravel pit and about 6 acres of hayfield is going to bring them about $20,000 a year of steady income. And that will last for the rest of their lives, given their ages. That's real money you cannot make cutting hay and growing corn on an old gravel pit. And I mention this gravel pit because many gravel pits in Vermont are classified as prime ag soils. Often those agricultural soil classifications are not updated even 50 years after the fact. So when we're talking about quote unquote ag land, we're talking about gravel pits. We're talking about land in some cases that is contaminated, groundwater contamination. I have a site like that in Wallingford. Technically it's ag land, but it's got a prohibition on wells because it has groundwater contamination from underground storage tanks, gas and diesel tanks many years ago. Finally, I want to talk about farm family in the southern part of the state. We signed a lease with them 3 years ago, and unfortunately, the father passed away about a year ago. His wife and his sons have inherited the farm. We have yet to file a CPG permit on this project. We are working on it, and we expect to file it shortly. But if this were to pass, it would kill that project, and it would deprive that family of more than $15,000 a year of diversified income for their farm. If this legislation passes, it's going to directly harm farm families. These farm families choose to plant solar to diversify their farm income. They choose to do it with their land for the benefit of their families. You might not like their choice, but it's not your land, it's their land. They should be allowed to choose what they do with it. I've yet to hear a convincing argument why farmers can't be trusted to make their own decisions on how best to use their land. And I hope anyone who votes in favor of this bill can explain why farmers can't be trusted with their own land. This bill is a kick in the teeth to farmers across Vermont. And for what benefit? It certainly isn't going to protect ag land for future generations. The bill prohibits solar, but no other form of development on more than 5 acres of land, which practically speaking means cost-effective solar will be banned in Vermont. Just to be clear, this bill prevents a farmer from having solar on their land, but allows them to pave over prime ag soils and put up a convenience store in a parking lot. Once land is lost to parking lots and McMansions and convenience stores, it's never going back into ag land. You all know that.
Well, I think you make a lot of assumptions that probably aren't true as far as with this committee.
We might have just.
I think we
know.
lost.
We lost him.
Okay.
But I know where you're going with that, and I agree.
See if he comes back on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It just closed on me. So I'll admit, I'm a bit baffled to be presenting here in the Ag Committee on this bill. Whoever drafted it
So
clearly thinks it's going.
let me stop you for a minute. First of all, I think you make a lot of assumptions that just aren't true about this committee, and I'm not hurt by that, but I just think that you're making a lot of assumptions that just isn't the way that it is. We are going to protect ag land, Mr. Hand. I'm going to tell you that right now. We are going to. And
I'm not trying to
and-
presume anything about you or what you're going to do. I'm talking specifically about the language in this bill.
Well, and we'll talk about that language in the bill, and we'll work a lot of things through, and we will talk about a lot of different things in this bill, and maybe we'll do something with the bill, maybe we won't do something with the bill, but there's a lot of things. But I can tell you, I can promise you this: we are going to protect ag land in the state of Vermont, no matter who comes in here and wants to have their opinions about what we do or what we don't do. And that will be a true story, whether it's this committee that does it or the committees going further. And then we know what's going on with ag land throughout the state of Vermont. We've heard terrifying statistics about what we've lost. We've lost 56% of our ag land since Act 250 came into effect, which was meant to protect ag land. We've lost another 11% in the last 5 years. All we got to do is start doing the math about where our farmland is. And I would challenge you, sir. If any of these projects that you're putting forward, did they have to be on prime ag land? Were there other lands that you could put your projects on? And because I do believe the answer is yes, there is.
So I just told you about one. It's a gravel pit, right? It's all rocks. We're putting it there, but that counts as prime ag in Vermont.
And Strand, this is Rob Plunkett. I'm glad you were able to join us. And we've heard a little bit about a lot of different things about specifically solar, not a lot about other reasons why primary ag land has been, I guess, lost, or what the reasons for them are. But what I hadn't heard was one thing you mentioned that you were just about to talk about, was that the rating of particular soils has not been updated in 50 years. Do you have a little bit more on that? Because we saw maps of different things, not specifically, but I did not know that a gravel pit could be designated as primary agricultural soil.
I am not an expert in prime ag soils. I'm not a farmer. I'm not a soil ecologist. I can tell you my experience having developed solar projects in Vermont. And so I can tell you about two projects in particular. I just told you about one. And then I have another one in Wallingford. It's a 50-acre parcel. It was a gravel pit for a long time, and then it had a hot mix asphalt plant on it. It was owned by Pike Industries. And they had underground storage tanks that leaked fuel into the ground, obviously created contamination. That was then remediated over a long period of time. But the soil maps, as I understand it, were issued at the federal level in the 1960s. And so a lot of time has passed since the 1960s. And even if the land is altered, from that time till today, it doesn't mean the soil maps have been updated. And getting them updated is not an easy process. We've effectively been told that it's more or less impossible in a reasonable time frame. And so when we permit a solar project, we have to list that as prime ag land. And it shows up in our permits. It says, 18 acres of prime ag land disturbed, for example. And that might just be 18 acres of gravel pit. But I want to step back for a minute and make something really clear. This bill, as it's written, is not about protecting ag land, right? As I said, any solar project that is built is required to have a decommissioning fund. That means the project will be removed and that land can be returned to agriculture. That is not true for any other type of development in Vermont. Nobody else is putting up decommissioning money.
Can you tell if there's any projects, Mr. Hand, that have done that so far?
I'm not aware of any because we haven't gotten to 25 years. And that's the typical lifespan of these projects.
And Mr. Hand, this is Senator Plunkett again. Just along those lines, we had heard about the decommissioning, that it could be returned for primary agricultural soil. And we've heard essentially that none have been yet, but I don't think any of us, well, some of us might see it in our lifetime, but we probably won't. But right now, let's say you had I'll just say a 10-acre solar installation. How long would it take for that to just be removed and returned to the state it was before? Do you have an estimate on that?
Like time-wise, how long?
Yeah, time-wise. And just ballpark it. I know you probably don't.
Yeah, I mean, probably about 4 weeks.
Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you, there's a solar project that I built in Barnet last year. It was about 7 acres, and it took about 3 years to permit. But from the day we went on site to the day we were producing power was 10 weeks to construct it. So to take it apart, yeah, I mean, a couple weeks, it's not that difficult. You're just taking posts out of the ground and that steel gets reused. A pretty good portion of the project is recyclable materials.
Yeah. We've had some questions on that too. Do you have kind of details on what happens with the solar panels? And I understand you probably weren't prepared for that.
So it's a solar project, right? And everyone wants to focus on the solar panels. But from a cost perspective, solar panels are maybe 20% of the total cost of the installation. We spend more money on steel racking and installing that racking than we do on solar panels. So, and if you look at the project from a weight perspective, there's a tremendous amount of steel. That steel all gets recycled. Steel has a lot of value. Obviously there's a whole recycled steel market, that's a global market. We've got copper wire, obviously that's going to get recycled. With it, the solar panels in particular, the aluminum frame absolutely gets recycled. The glass top sheet, glass back sheet almost certainly get recycled. And then the individual cells, that's polysilicon, high likelihood that it gets recycled. So most of the components within the solar panel get recycled. Now, to date, we have had very few projects that have been decommissioned. And so we don't have a huge industry to recycle solar panels because we simply don't have that many solar panels to recycle yet.
Great, thank you.
And I'd like to go back and to my notes here and make one other additional comment. So this bill would effectively ban solar projects over a megawatt. almost all the land that we look at has some prime ag or important soils component to it. And so by banning large-scale solar projects and saying you can only do small ones, it doesn't say you can't do them on prime ag, it just says they have to be under 5 acres. So if we switch from building solar projects that are 5 megawatts and cover maybe 25 or 30 acres to building 5 times as many 1 megawatt projects, the impact is going to be the same. The only thing that will really change there is that we are going to load a tremendous amount of additional cost onto ratepayers. And it's going to happen in 2 ways. One, when you build smaller projects, they're more expensive. The permitting cost is very similar. The amount of time I have to spend on a 1 megawatt and a 5 megawatt is virtually the same from a development perspective. So we're going to create a whole bunch of solar projects that are more expensive. The other thing that's in this bill is this requirement to do a life cycle analysis to look at the carbon emissions. And this is kind of just crazy. You're essentially saying that every single solar project needs to do the same study over and over and over again. That makes no sense. NREL did this study back in 2004. There are numerous studies out there that have looked at this, looked at the carbon emissions, looked at the energy intensity of producing solar panels and building a solar array. Why would we reinvent the wheel? And all of those costs that are proposed in this bill, doing the same study over and over and over again, lighting money on fire, those are going to get paid for by ratepayers. It's just going to shove a ton of costs onto ratepayers for absolutely no benefit. It makes no sense whatsoever. If you want to pay to do a study that's already been done many times, tell the PUC to do it and do it one time. Why would you do it over and over and over again? It makes no sense.
Well, one reason is each project's a little different. So how one of your projects in Wallingford compared to one in another town has a dramatic different effect. Same amount of cost, maybe, and then your point, just saying it's already been done, that means there's a formula out there and it can be done rather quickly. So I don't see it as an inconvenience because in other
Why though? Why are we doing it?
manufacturing building, they have to do an impact for that project.
I think the why is, sir, is because when you guys are putting these projects in, you are making the claims that that's what you're doing. So why wouldn't you have to prove the claims as far as what you're doing? You're talking about what you're saving and what you're doing and all of that. So why couldn't we fairly ask you, okay, show us that. Show us what you're doing. This is what you are doing. This is what your project's going to do. And that's how it's doing it. And I will say that we are getting a little off a topic about where we really are as a committee and what we're most concerned about, which is not regulating solar. It's really about just keeping solar off of our prime ag fields. That's really where we're getting. And at the end of the day.
So can I ask a question? Is it about protecting farmland or is it about keeping solar off of farmland?
It's protecting prime ag land.
Right. And solar projects are required to be decommissioned.
Excuse me?
Solar projects are required to be decommissioned. We have to put money up to do it. So if that's the issue, that issue has already been conclusively addressed at the PUC.
Okay, so the other thing is because we're going to hear from a town that's going to be severely impacted by a project. The other issue, because we are talking about it, is that you're the only industry that doesn't have to pay tax on any of the land that you're using it as you're there.
100% inaccurate. You are so wrong.
Okay, then tell us.
Okay. And this is kind of amazing that I have to explain this, but I will do it.
Hold on. Can we lower the temperature in here?
Yeah, it's just I feel like I'm
No. Now we come in here and we're trying to solve a problem. And we're trying to do this in a way that satisfies both communities. There's no reason, Mr. Hand, hold on. There's no reason to interrupt and to how about this? How about listening to what we have to say? Because we're listening to what you have to say. All right. We're just trying to solve a situation. No reason to be adversarial at all. At all. and so the remarks, the snide remarks, it's not helpful. Okay, I mean, we will do in the best interest of Vermonters in the end. So what we need from you is to give us the data, to give us your information, and that's it. And then we'll make a final decision. But please do not be adversarial, because we're not. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
And Mr. Hand, this is Senator Plunkett. I want to apologize. The hearing that we had just before now did get rather contentious. This committee's not usually like this. And I know you reached out to me to ask to testify. And I had expected it to go a lot more cordial than it has. I think it will from now on. But I just wanted to let you know that if I had known it would have gone like this, I would have kind of given you more of a heads up. So I think we did have a question where you're going to explain about the property taxes for solar installations.
Yes, thank you. I apologize. I'm heated on this because this bill appears to be, from my perspective, aimed at killing solar in Vermont, and it's something I've worked at very hard for more than a decade. So, property tax. Land under a solar array is taxed the same way it was before that solar array showed up. Now, there is one exception. If that land was in current use, you have to remove it from current use and pay a penalty before you install the solar. So let's say we have a piece of land. You were referring to one in Lowell. So in that case, I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say that parcel is assessed at $250,000. We would pay property tax on that land at a value of $250,000. We would then also pay property tax in the form of the uniform capacity tax, $4 per kW of installed capacity. That goes to the state education fund. We also will pay property tax on the solar array to the town based upon an assessed value of the solar array. So there are three types of tax. One is very specific, just the land tax under the solar array. There is then the educational component of the property tax, which is paid to the state. And then there is the local portion of property tax on the solar array, which is paid to the town. So there are three types of tax. The land is absolutely taxed, and it's taxed at, if the case is that we bought it, then it's taxed at whatever we buy it at. If it's leased, then it's taxed as if that land was before. Nothing changes.
Yeah, Mr. Hand, I had a question. Earlier, you mentioned a couple of examples where farming family received revenue from having a solar array put on their ag land. In one case, I think you mentioned $30,000 a year, and another it was $15,000 a year. Is that per person in the family, or is that one payment? And for how long a period of time does that either 30K or 15K get paid?
Yeah, so those are payments those are annual payments to the landowner, and the amount varies just kind of based on the value of the land and how much land. So in the case of the 30,000, that was for roughly twice as many acres as the 15,000. So different size project, so different value to the amount of, or different amount of land that we were using, therefore different amount of lease payment. Typically, those agreements are for 25 or more years.
Okay. And
Because
is
that's
the land valued differently if it was a gravel pit versus, you mentioned in one case you were on a hayfield, pasture land, whatever, or were they growing crops on it at one time?
I don't know whether they were, in that case, it was, we have about 18 acres of gravel pit and about 6 acres of farm field. I don't know whether it was in row crops, corn or something. At present, and when we showed up, it was a hayfield.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say, generally speaking, you know, I've talked to a lot of farmers and I've talked to a lot of landowners. We will often approach a landowner. So take the first example I gave. They have 200 acres. We approached them and said, we'd like to do a solar project in this field. And they said, nope, absolutely not. Can't do that field. We need that field. That is our best field for growing corn. But we have this other field over here. You know, we looked at it and said, well, it's not perfect for us, but you know, we could make that field work. When we talk to a farmer, it's not like we walk up and just say, that's the field and we'll take it, right? These guys know which fields are their most productive, and they will decide ultimately. They'll say, I can't do that one. That's my best field for corn, but I could offer you this one over here. And we'll look at it, and ultimately you either come to a deal or you don't. But these guys know what portions of their land they want to keep in production and which portions they could allow to have solar for one generation and then take it back out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hand, would it be possible for you to have some of them farmers reach back out to us? Just to say how what you've done has helped them out, and because that'll go a long ways too when deciding how to move forward on this.
I can certainly ask. I mean,
Well, you
obviously
know
I'm
better
here-
than I do of who you have for customers. That's why I'm asking you specifically.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
I mean, I'm certainly willing to ask. I would also, I don't know what they'll say, right? I mean, generally speaking, most people don't want to put themselves in the crosshairs of government
I want them in a
regulation.
crosshair, Mr. Hand. We really, really don't.
Just their testimony.
Just their testimony.
And I trust that Senator Heffernan is not suggesting that you're lying to us, Mr. Hand.
No, I am not. I want this
Senator Heffernan.
I actually want to get the people that had this have solar fields on how they are now. Well, yes, I think the right decision. It's very helpful. Happy I did it. No, I didn't. The benefit wasn't as good as I was hoping. Actual testimony on if what they did was the right choice. And
Sure.
I think that's a fair question. I'm not trying to
Oh
be.
yeah, no, I'm not suggesting it's unfair. I'm just saying I'll ask them, but I don't know the answers. I can't promise you that
I
they'll come
appreciate
and talk to you.
And Mr. Hand, you brought up a very good point about what we've talked about in further talks of on how we move this forward. And I've used the example. You have a farm family that's got 1,000 acres, 250 acres of its prime. They have 750 acres that isn't prime ag land, but they might have pastured cows in the day that they couldn't really grow crops on, but they could still work. And what we're doing is exactly kind of how you laid out the farmer saying, and we have been very sensitive to telling farmers what they can do with their land, but we are also asking that we look at some of the lands that isn't prime ag land that you can't really grow crops on, that used to pasture cows. It was good enough to do that, and it might be a little bit harder to build on, but that we push you towards those areas more than prime ag land, because we understand prime ag land usually is easier to build on. We understand that it's going to be less costly. We do two things by pushing you off onto other lands. First is that you stay off the prime ag lands, as we've talked about. But second of all, we actually help the farmers by making land that's less valuable to them a little bit more valuable, and maybe that they could get a little bit more money for some land that isn't as valuable as that prime ag land. I hope that makes a little sense to you, because you kind of laid that out as well.
Yeah, I understand you're saying. I guess I would say the definitions of the various soil classifications start to get very, very important in the way you laid it out there, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that that's an area that absolutely should be looked into. And I would expect that if you want to go that way, my suggestion would be you need to get some testimony, and it's not me. I don't know who it is, but you ought to get some testimony on the various types of ag classifications and think about that very seriously. Because the prime ag, just as a catch-all, grabs a tremendous amount of land. In many cases, it would fit the description you said, which is it's not very good for growing crops, maybe was used for pasturing cattle or something like that. But I think you really got to look into that to understand what you're catching in your definition.
And we did take some secondary testimony on it when we were talking to a Watershed Alliance, and they had said that, hey, you know, yes, we have solar on our land, and it's not it's not on the fields that we're growing crops. And two examples of one of them was up in a corner of a field across the fence, and it really wasn't anything that they could grow anything on, and they weren't using the land anymore. So we put a solar array there. The other one actually was a little bit of prime ag land, but it was across the railroad tracks, between the railroad tracks and the river. And the railroad said, we really are very nervous about you crossing with your farm implements over and over and over again. And so they were sensitive to that, and they ended up putting a solar array on that land in itself, which was, again, prime ag land, but it made a little bit more sense, and it solved two problems, if not more than that, as far as where they cited. So, you know, we're just looking for some reasonableness of some of the decisions that we've been made, and not to say that it's been unreasonable. Probably bad choice of words on my part.
Yeah, and I think that description, what you just described, is an extremely common scenario, right? The location of a say you got 10 acres of prime ag. Well, if there's no farmer within 10 miles of it who's growing corn, you know, has got dairy cattle or something, it's going to be pretty hard to farm that, right? It needs to be nearby a farm. And so many of the farmers that we've worked with, they have many fields that they work, right? And often what they'll say to us, and this is what's going on in Lowell, right? I mean, you've got a field that's being used just for hay. It's not being used for row crops. And the farm family decided that they would rather sell that field than try to actively farm it. And so, you know, that property was on the market, and we didn't pick it because it was prime ag. We picked it because it was next to a substation, and the farm family that owned it wanted to sell it because it didn't work for them anymore.
Well, I think you've led us right into the next part of our segment. We do have Jennifer Blay from the Select Board Chair from Lowell. Mrs. Blay, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
How are you?
Great. Is Thomas still talking? Because I see his mic still on, so I was just checking.
You are, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I, as well as Thomas, was surprised to be asked to speak to the Senate Ag Committee because I'm a middle school science teacher living in Lowell, and I'm currently the Select Board Chair for the town of Lowell, which is what I'm here speaking on. I am at the school trying to be away from students while Winter Carnival is going on. So if there's any interruptions, I apologize.
We understand.
I'm on the clock, so I've been watching the clock. So to be honest, when we talk about farming, Thomas shared about other people. My entire family history goes back to farming because I think most of us do. I was born and raised in the Northeast Kingdom. I had family immigrate here from Chicoutimi, Quebec in 1912 for a longer growing season. Actually, that is stated in some of my historical genealogy. And farming, my husband's family came from farming. They were actually farmed out as kids to work for others. Didn't get to live at home because the families were so large. So definitely know a little bit about what we see around here in the Northeast Kingdom, and deep respect for farmers. That's probably what made it so hard in the town of Lowell for the Select Board to even stand against the solar project, because the Reboyne family is probably one of the most revered families in our community because they have farmed that land for so long and taken care of it. And they've also shared that land with all of us. Sorry, I might get teary-eyed. So they go above and beyond to be there for other people. And their barn burnt several years ago, and actually the community raised funds to make sure that they were taken care of and things were done. And anyway, and I work and talk about small communities and I guess how interconnected everything is. I work at the school with one of the granddaughters of that family. So it becomes really tricky to fight a fight knowing that you're fighting the very people that you work with and live with and care about. And they deserve the funding that they're getting out of this deal with Thomas. It is a piece of property that the father passed away and the kids are of an age they'd like to retire. They would see great benefit from the money Thomas is offering. Everything I really heard Thomas talk about with solar development is the amount of money farmers can make from these deals. We had someone in town while it was for sale offer this family double the value, the market value that we had recorded in the town ledgers that it was being taxed at. And then Thomas, I believe, was able to offer about 3 times what that was worth. And so, of course, that's their retirement. That's what they're going to, take away from their years of work with that land. So that makes it, I guess, in part for the town, really hard to fight. So we didn't even attempt to fight it in the first 45 days. One, because of lack of knowledge, because we are a sleepy little town of about 1,000 people and not much tends to happen here in Lowell. I work a full-time job as well as the other select board members. And we just get together to manage the budget and the roads and any other small things that come up. So to have something with a deadline of the 45 days, we actually missed that window entirely. And then I started to talk to people and realized that we had a bed and breakfast that was closing that bordered that property because they didn't feel they had a voice in our community. Not because we're hard to live with, but they revered the Reboynes. And they said, if this is what they want to do with their land, we don't want to look at it. We don't want to be up against it. And we don't want to fight with them. So we're going to leave. So that bed and breakfast, they closed, they sold to somebody else already within this PUC process. I've had to learn a lot. The PUC language is not easy. The Public Utility Commission. I feel the solar companies have a definite advantage when going to the table because they bring the same experts multiple times. When I was looking at the different testimonies, they've been in many of the same cases together. So I had about 6 weeks to gather testimony and evidence, and I cannot find an expert witness available or willing to testify because I don't have the funds to pay them. I don't have people who live in my community who have the same knowledge and skills. I can't afford the lawyer that we would need to speak the language of the PUC. Everything has to be written in a certain way. When I finally learned how to write discovery and I got back the responses from Thomas Hand's lawyer, there was a lot of language in there that I didn't understand about how many objections they could have and all the reasons why what I was asking was vague or inadequate or not willing to be heard. And so I'm fighting a fight I don't understand. The reason the select board chose to fight that fight was because it doesn't align with our town plan or our vision statement or our goals and objectives. And if I read to you the vision statement for our town, that never thought they'd be in a battle like this. It's our primary and fundamental intention of Lowell to remain a rural agricultural town that encourages farming and a town that encourages individual businesses and entrepreneurship of a scale that can integrate harmoniously into its residential areas. So farming and agriculture is huge. This piece of property has been farmed since 1902. It is surrounded on all sides by homes and properties. So it is in the middle. It is not considered our village because when we identified our village as a town, that farmland has been farmed since 1902. So we labeled it rural, and right across the road is the school. And so our school is considered village. So Thomas is able to say to the PUC that it's not in the village center, but it is right across from the school. The kids are there sledding today. It may be their last opportunity to sled on the hill. He said that they can continue to do that, but with 14,000 solar panels going over there and being fenced in, I'm not really sure that's probably a good idea for the kids. So it's also, I heard you guys speak a little bit to the amount of loss of farmland as I've been delving deep into this and realizing how many towns lose against the PUC. I say lose because I'm fighting a fight that The town can't afford the lawyer because our taxes just were increased because we just went through our new tax assessments and people came out saying we can't afford the fact that our taxes just doubled to now hire a lawyer for a case we don't think we're going to win because the towns don't win when they go to the PUC. And I actually looked up the record. The towns don't win anymore because they can't win on aesthetics, and prime ag land wasn't supposed to be used really for can't even speak, for solar. In my mind, it was supposed to be brownfields to get the major credits. And I did hear Thomas speak to that. I mean, we have an asbestos mine. That would be a great site in my mind for a solar field. Even though the problem with that is you're stirring up the asbestos. And so they're worried about it being airborne. However, that's an entire area. We have no problem with renewable energy in our community. We currently have the wind towers. They cover a section of our mountains. And I'm a person who lives in the mountains, always have, and surrounded by them. I hike them on the long trail, and I value our space, and we actually generate enough power for 26,000 homes with those wind towers that are already here that divided our town. And when people talk about the division, I moved here about the time of the solar panels went into place. And people still talk about it, argue about it. Family are still divided over it. And when I look at the solar project and the idea, when it talks about entrepreneurship and businesses harmoniously being with the residents, it's surrounded by homes. We asked people to come out and vote, not about how they felt about solar, but about if they would fund a lawyer, because I felt that I was sinking and not able to hold my own. In this case, and that there were too many people and at stake, right? Too many big issues. And I didn't want to divide the town because it's really hard when you serve your community that you want to serve everybody. You want to serve the farmer who has a right to sell their land. You want to serve the people who have a right to have a view and to not have their home. I have Doug Manning, his house is built to oversee that entire field. And now 14,000 solar panels could potentially be angled towards his house every morning because the sun rises over his house and then moves away. The kids across, I come to work every morning. I work at the school. And when I leave my car, that's the view I see, right, is the field there. And to speak about the loss of the farmland, I was really surprised how much we've lost. And then I started looking at the grasslands, and the field is definitely considered a grassland habitat. That's something different that wasn't really talked about. And I had so I've been digging into grassland habitat and the fact that there's only 4% in the state of Vermont. So when we look at the birds and the different things that live there, that habitat is being reduced substantially. And I know Thomas feels that solar is under attack, but those large solar arrays do tend to go on large open spaces such as grasslands and farmers' lands because it's one of the only open spaces. So when you guys asked about, I know I'm jumping around, there's just a lot to say, and I know I'm under limited time. So when you talk about soil, I actually was researching how it actually impacts the soil. And I have a quote that I would like to read. And this quote came from the NVDA, which is the Northeast Vermont Regional Development Plan. And they talk about the soil and the impact. So soil is influenced by the organic matter that's deposited on the surface, which we all know, we're constantly trying to put some cow manure or different types of things on there to create good organic matter with our compost. The organisms that exist within it, its combination with parent materials. Within soils, organisms and fungi provide food for animals, create organic matter for more efficient vegetative production. This vegetative layer in turn helps to purify surface water. So when I was thinking about the farmland, not only is it a grassland habitat that's declining significantly, but those soils that the farmers have been farming for years, we are one of the I think we're a great state. I mean, we have such clean water. So when I think about our water, part of it's in due fact from the farmers who are farming that soil and making it so rich and so that it has a way to be filtered. And so with the solar panels, I am under the understanding that in order to preserve the prime ag land so that it can be used later, they peel off the top layer of the soil and they pile it so that it's not impacted. But then I'm thinking if you're piling the top layer of soil, you're removing what's actually going to help purify and keep our water clean. We're going to pile it so that it's good later on after 25 or 30 years, which then none of the stuff that's in it is going to survive in my mind. And then it leads you to soil compaction. And what I got on soil compaction was really interesting. This also comes from page 181 of the NVDA. I'll tell you some really good heavy reading in there. They've done a great job with how to preserve the Northeast Kingdom. So it says compacted soil, which occurs naturally as well as through land development and industrial processes, and I heard Thomas speak about all the steel and what they're going to be doing with the land, makes it more difficult for water to be absorbed. This creates two changes to the soil formation process. First, water cannot flow through the soils in order to leach contaminated particles. Second, it creates erosion and carries away soil. As discussed, underwater resources, erosion contributes to flooding and removal of productive topsoil, distribution of chemicals on the soil, and sedimentation of surface water. So as I read that, I'm not a scientist, but I am a middle school science teacher. It doesn't sound like what we'll be doing out there with that soil compaction. I have to think about, it's not a flood zone at all, but the LeClaire Brook runs through a section of it that he's already said if he gets his permit, he wants to do something with culverts and moving water. So I have to now worry about the LeClaire Brook and people who have properties near there. I have to consider the people who have wells and springs nearby. Part of this project sits on the source water protection for my school, and I've been told there'll be no impact. However, we've peeled back layers of soil. We're creating soil compaction, and I've been told not to worry, but then I read articles about PFAS, which he said it's not about the solar panels. And I guess they're changing the way solar panels are developed and they're coming up with newer and better ways. I really hope that's the case. However, I keep asking what kind of solar panels that he's using, and he can't say because he has to wait until after he gets the permit in order to buy them. So then I can't really put it in my argument about how good or bad the solar panels are for our environment. And I know he spoke a lot about money, and I know that the bottom line really does come down to money all the time because we have to make things affordable. It hasn't been affordable for the farmers. I've lived here my whole life, and I've raised my children here, and I think 2 or 3 family sides of mine, I go back 5, 6 generations in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. When I go to Westfield Cemetery, I have 5 generations of family buried there. I live here. So Thomas lives in Oregon, and Thomas is a solar developer who does business here because we want renewable energy in Vermont. I applaud us for our efforts, but I also don't think that using all of our farmland and having nothing left after is really what's best. We're not going to have great water. We're not going to have any grassland. And it's funny, I never cared about birds as much as I've been learning to care about them recently. I went to the Amazon rainforest in 2024. And when I was there, I worked with Cornell University, and we were looking at birds and how they actually tell the health of your land by what's living there. And because they can actually be a way for you to tell how healthy your environment is. And that's actually something they're doing in the Amazon, is they're actually tracking in the rainforests where they were cut down, they're tracking the bird habitat and how it's coming back into those forests. And so when I came back to school, I started taking my kids outside, and we started looking at the birds, studying birds, and realizing that we have bobolinks here, which I had never realized that bobolinks are definitely an identified tracked bird in Vermont. We actually have created.
Jennifer, can you repeat that? You have what?
So the bird is called a bobolynx.
Okay, I didn't catch what kind of bird.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The bobolinks, the reason why I bring it up is because they actually found them in the grassland habitat across the road from the school, which is the primary ag land. And it was told to me that even though there was a mating pair found there, that as long as we mitigate and we do our work to preserve farmland somewhere else, we can use this farmland and not care about the birds here. And I don't know, I guess a part of me as a middle school science teacher who got to see Jane Goodall before she died, a lot of really cool things I've had a chance to do. It just sticks with me that, you know, what we do matters. Everything we do matters. And you guys are part of a board that, I'm trying really hard not to be emotional. I had a hard time knowing I was going to speak today. When I went to the Amazon, I thought I was in the middle of nowhere, right? And that I was going to go to this vast open space. And somebody told me that nowhere is everybody somewhere. Well, I live in the middle of nowhere. I feel like a nobody because I live in a town of 1,000 people, but it's my somewhere. So I care deeply about it, and I appreciate your time.
I'll just ask this, and I want to talk to Mr. Hand again. What is the town's position on this project, and have any if they're against it or for it?
So there has not been a town vote on their position because I really didn't want to put neighbor against neighbor and have arguments devolving, like having it be the way it was with the wind. And to my understanding, the town residents don't actually have a say. The town select board has a chance to argue their points at the PUC level, the Public Utility Commission, with interveners, and we currently have 6 interveners. We have 3 landowners. We have a cemetery because it goes back to 1812. We have the select board and the school. All have become interveners. And when we did a vote, we voted on whether or not the select board could spend additional funds that we did not have in our budget for a lawyer. I will say I had more people turn out for that vote than have ever turned out at town meeting. We had, it was 86 to 86, so 170. I'm not good at math today, so 178 people came out, and it was a tie vote. 86 wanted us to fight against it, and the other 86 did not. And it wasn't that they didn't want us to fight against it. They didn't want to spend the money. I don't know where they stood personally on the solar issue. So I can't speak to that specifically. I will say that when I became elected as a select board member, I think there was about 60 votes cast. So meaning when we meet as a town, usually there's 80 to 100 of us in a room. So know that 170, right? I said 86, 86. So 174. My numbers are off. See, I told you. I don't have my numbers written down. I'm one of those
You're
people
all
who
good.
write them down.
Don't make me do math on the spot.
I was like, oh goodness.
So, well, we want to thank you for your testimony. And very much so, again, we're not sure, where we're going to be going on all this stuff. What we're doing, as Senator Major said eloquently a little while ago, we're just taking some testimony. Mr. Hand, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Hand, just one question. I've never asked this question before of anyone, but do you have to do the 3-acre rule mitigation with the state of Vermont? Do you have to devise a plan for 3-acre rules of stormwater runoff?
I don't know what the 3-acre rule is. What is?
Okay, I would take that as a no because you would
Well,
know.
hold on. We absolutely have to have stormwater permits. We have a construction stormwater permit. We have an operational stormwater permit if required. Operational stormwater is triggered if you have more than 1 acre. I think the 3 acres you're referring to is how it used to be, because it came down to 1 acre.
Well,
3 acres of impermeable.
yeah, you would have 3
surface.
acres of impervious surface, and I don't know if they're counting solar panels as impervious surface, but
If we have more than 1 acre of impervious, we're required to have an operational stormwater permit. So that's an ongoing permit for the life of the project. I think every solar project I've ever done, we have to have a construction stormwater permit. That's different than the operational phase. So I think the answer to your question is yes, we very much have to comply with stormwater rules.
Okay, we're gonna have to run. We want to thank both of you for coming in. And we're very great testimony on both sides. We appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.